figure out how to do that on your own computer and having your mic on?
I think in the past we've done it before. We were using StreamYard.
Using what?
StreamYard. STREAM.
Oh, it's a type of stream.
Yeah, it's a
It's a
broadcasting
streaming.
kind of. You can put banners, intermissions, or just
Gotcha.
yeah cover pages.
Nice.
All right, got a guest here. Hello. He's muted. Give it a couple of minutes for people to sign in. All right, who we got here? Mohit is here. I don't know who this person is.
Presenting.
Hold on, we have more people coming in, and I have to make a couple announcements. Yeah. All right. How many people we got here? We have 10 people. All right. I think we can go ahead. Maybe try to start for a moment. Okay. Let's see. All right. Welcome everyone. My name is Leo Chen. I am the chapter chair of IxDA Houston. Um, Today we have Carol Tyger. She's gonna talk about pricing and design. But before we start the talk, I have a couple of announcements. We XDA conference this year, XDA 2021. We are going to do the topic of design perilous times. People you can feel free to go to Interaction Design Conference webpage and check it out. We have lined up a lot of topics, and some of it covers the time we are in right now, and then some of it also covers social changes in the mainstream culture here right now, and feel free can go to Interaction 21 at .xda.org to check out the keynote speakers and all the talks. All right, and then this year we are doing a special for the conference. Uh, Usually, it costs 1,500, and then you have to attend in person. And this year, obviously, given the COVID crisis, and then taking consideration into the health and safety of everyone, the event is online. Uh, gonna be for 21, and um, we are also doing a special pricing this year. The pricing is gonna be $500 per person, and then if you buy in the ticket, and then we're gonna give you another one for free. So you get you pay $500, you can get 2 tickets for the whole conference. So there's gonna be workshops, different meetup, networking events, also as well online as well. I think the ticket is on sale right now, and then just go check it out and then purchase your tickets uh, should be interesting talk this year. A lot of interesting talk this year. All right, thank you everyone for attending the event, and then I'm gonna turn it over to Carol, and she can have a talk on pricing and design. All right. All right, Carol, take it away.
Okay. Um, so first off, it's a relatively small group. I wonder if we should, just so I know who's in the room and where they're coming from and what they're interested in. Leo, do you think that's okay?
Yeah, sure. You wanna maybe people you can try to maybe turn on your microphone and video, and then we can have a do a drum circle maybe in the beginning.
David, you're it. Will you go first?
Yeah, sure. I'm part of IxDA designer working at Schlumberger. I've been here in Houston for about 3 years and work on enterprise software, and just I'm working full time. I think it's always important for us to understand our worth and understand how much we should be charging. So that's why this really interests me.
Great. Thanks, David. Mohit, could you go on that?
Mohit?
That's okay. Does somebody else want to introduce themselves?
Yeah, okay, great. We just want to make sure they can.
You could. You want to go ahead and introduce yourself?
Yeah, hi. Well, I'm a front-end developer, very interested in leaning more heavily into design. So that's why this talk interests me a lot. And I'm in Brownsville, Texas.
Great. Who else wants to introduce themselves?
Hi, this is Mohit Gupta, and I'm here right now. I'm working for Novartis, and right now, even though I'm working out of Houston, but right now I'm in California, so for some work. So happy to see everybody, and happy day, everybody. So that's about me.
Great, thank you. Ileana, it sounds like you were about to go.
Yes. I was going to introduce myself. Designer that for almost, it's going to be about 6 months. But I'm contract freelance at the moment. So this is a topic that's very interesting to me into probably like a year into design in that space. So that's why I'm here.
Thank you.
Hi everyone, I'm Melanie Tim. I'm a UX designer over at Schlumberger here in Houston. I'm interested in this topic because I'm being asked these days to evaluate more and more contractors and contracts for design work for our organization, as well as being previously in the freelance space. So it's always good to check out what the trends are and how design is being priced in these different sectors. So looking forward to the talk.
Great, thanks.
Hello everyone, my name is IxDA. I'm from San Francisco. I'm an interior designer and I've been freelancing for almost 2 years. I have a little bit idea about the pricing, but I like to learn more. That's the reason I'm here today. Thank you.
Great. And Leo, go on ahead and introduce yourself. Maybe everyone already knows you, but...
Some of the people already know me. So my name is Leo Chen. I'm the chapter chair of IxDA Houston. Besides that, when I'm not doing IxDA, I'm the creative director of Shifter Design. So we are a consulting firm that based in Houston here. We do 3D animations, interaction design, UI UX work, and also product design. And
Great. Go on ahead and get started. Thanks for introducing yourselves. It's better to have a little bit of context about who's in the audience whenever I'm speaking to a new group like this. Um, so this is what we're going to be covering about myself. So you know where I'm coming from, but also so that you take what I say with a grain of salt. Um, Everyone's limited by their own experiences and their own biases and their own perception. And I just want to be really candid about where I come from and what my bias is and what my experience is so that you can filter out what I'm saying and make sure it's relevant to you. Then we're going to talk about a framework for thinking about freelance pricing. It's not the end all be all, but it's the ways I've thought about it. And then we'll talk about value based pricing, and then we'll talk about measuring. So start off with questions. So this is a little bit about me. Okay. How's that? Whoa. That didn't work out, did it? Are you bar at the bottom? Can you read the whole slide?
I mean, I could see the slide. Yeah. That, what small, just so
it's
that
gone.
It's gone.
It looks a different size than my screen, so if I might have to change. But anyways, I'm a VP and advisor. I don't really live anywhere right now. I'm currently calling you from my sister-in-law's childhood bedroom in my in-laws' house in Albuquerque, New Mexico. I'm from Houston. I went to West Lanier and Lamar. Moved away, came back to Houston after being in Austin and New York, and went back to Montrose, loved it. I was working at theblinds.com when I was back in Houston, and then at Spruce. Hablo español. Veo que I speak Spanish. I know there's some Spanish speakers in the audience. My family's from Spain and Venezuela, and I like to do a lot of outdoorsy things, and I really like to play a game called Settlers of Catan. And I travel a lot, which is why I don't really have a home right now. We were supposed to spend, me and my husband, our first year of our honeymoon abroad traveling, and obviously that didn't work out, and so we had to flex, and here we ended up. My background is in math and industrial engineering. I used to be a teacher. I know a lot about marketing and product. I'm now a VP of product for a remote digital health company, and before that I was a freelancer, a product freelancer. And the reason the freelancer matters is because I had to figure out how to price myself. And that was really hard for me to do. And also, as a VP of product and as a director of product, I've hired a ton of freelance designers. So I've been on both sides of this, where I'm evaluating the marketplace of freelancers, and when I'm trying to convince a client that the freelancer price I chose was right. So hopefully these experiences that I've had will help give you a new perspective on how you can think about pricing yourself, and some of the stuff that we learned today will translate. You can price even a product. So I love to chat, and I feel like we have a lot of time, so I could answer questions about me and my background if you're interested, or we can kind of keep going. Does anyone have any questions for me? All good. Okay, I'm gonna keep going. So freelancer pricing is relative to the assumed future value provided. Now, how do you get to that assumed future value? From my perspective, there's two inputs for the value. One of them is the market value of the freelancer, and the other one is the potential impact to revenue that that freelancer will have. Anyone have any questions or comments about market value?
So I have a quick question over here. Let's say, while we are kind of looking for the market value, do you look at a benchmark anywhere of the pricing? Because I feel like the pricing and the rate chart varies from, the sector as well as the location where you are based out of.
Yeah, so location matters less now than it used to. But the location matters, and looking at the market value. The one place I get the market value is when I just look at job postings and you see salary bands. You can also go to Glassdoor and get salary bands. But that is one way to size up market value. It'll kind of give you some perspective. If you've been 5 years or 10 years, if you operate at a director level or if you operate at an associate level, this can be an indicator for what your rate should be. Ileana, were you going to say something?
Sorry, I'm also eating at the same time. Well, you mentioned Glassdoor, and when I was job hunting, I did a lot of that to see not only the range of pricing, but also what people, because it's really important to me what people in the company say. So I don't know if that adds a little bit of the assumed value of this slide, but that's another thing that I look into as well.
Yeah, whenever you're choosing a job, for sure. But I think it's in Glassdoor where you can just say, like, what is the expected salary for this many years of experience and this level of an organization and this vertical, and you can get some pretty clear salary ranges. Now, if you're wondering, like, how does salary translate to an hourly rate, I was given the advice. So you basically take the year-long salary and you divide it by 50. So that's assuming that you get 2 weeks off, right? And then you take, so that's 50 weeks in a year, and then you divide that by 40, because that's like that assumption that it's 40 hours per week, and there you get some hourly rate. But that hourly rate does not include all the overhead, which is if a company were to hire you, they'd be paying for your insurance, they'd be paying for the lights over your head, they'd be paying for all sorts of stuff. So the suggestion is divide by 50, divide by 40, multiply by 1.5. And that is taking something that is an art and making it seem very scientific. And I just want to acknowledge that there's a lot of room to wiggle and a lot to be desired in that formula. That's one data point for you. If you find a job posting that has this clearly big rated stated salary or a clearly stated salary band, and you think you fit into that description really well, that's exactly the rate you are in the right market, that is one data point to figure out what you could charge hourly.
So just one quick question. So when we're talking freelance, for the purposes of this conversation, are we thinking of somebody who's kind of going into a contract role, or somebody who's actually kind of managing their own freelance business where they're kind of, and I know there's some movement in that definition as well, but
yeah, I guess I don't understand the difference. And I think what you're talking about is a contract that is a full-time contract. So it's already 40 hours a week.
Yeah, I think it's maybe more of a coming in and delivering UX services based on that versus maybe like an hourly wage. Yeah.
So at least in all the contracts I negotiate, even if they are full-time contracts, everything, oftentimes it ends up being hourly. And I'll talk later about other things other than hourly. But from a salary perspective and from an hourly rate, that's how I'd look at it. Now, if you're like, we're talking for an annual salary for someone, what should the contractor rate be? My assumed rate for a contractor would be like, what would you pay for a full-time employee salary? And I'd still multiply that times 1.5 because the contractor's taking on a lot of risk, not having a full-time job and not getting insurance and not getting all these things from you. But that is me speaking as a freelancer from the freelancer perspective, from the contractor's perspective.
Okay, thank you.
Does that answer your question, Melanie?
Kind of. I think we'll get through it as we
get
into it more.
So the reason I put previous experience, portfolio salary, strategic input, so these are all what was your most recent salary? What level of strategic input are you giving? And what does your portfolio look like? And so these are, I think, the ways to figure out where you fit in to the market. And then the other input of value is the potential impact for revenue. So is this, the work that you're going to be doing. Like, are we talking about like $1 million project, or is this $1 billion project, or is this like $100 project? And the range of difference and impact that you could be having on the bottom line for this company, and how many dollars they have and how much money they have, influences how much, in theory, you should be charging. So, recently, when I was doing my hourly rates, I charged over 30% less for a small startup I cared about than I did for a big company that I didn't really need the gig. And I just priced them high, and I was like, if they say no, fine. And if they say yes, then I'll get paid extra for the fact that I'm not that interested in this job. So there's a few ways to kind of manipulate your pricing, and I think one of the, if I could ask you to take one takeaway from this, it's that you alone do not define the rate, but it's also your client. So it's how much they could possibly pay, how much value you could possibly be adding for them, and what market you're in, and what your competition is. And you're always trying to price yourself with all of these different things in mind. Okay. So yeah, the good pricing models are going to strike a balance between the client and the freelancer incentive. So if we even go back, so you've got the freelancer on the left, like who they are and what they're bringing, and then on the right you have the client, and you've got to acknowledge both to get a good price, the right kind of price. So there's a few different pricing models, which maybe, Melanie, this is going to touch on what you're asking. So the first one is hourly, which we've already spoken about. Another one is project-based. So project-based pricing, there's two ways to approach it. One of them is you look at the value that you're going to be adding, and so you're saying like this is a $1 million project, and the impact I'm going to have is probably like a 10% lift. So I could claim to be responsible for $100,000 of that effort. And so you think about it that way, and you take a chunk of it, and like for the amount of time it's going to take, for the amount of scope it is, just like what makes sense. If you think you can ascribe $100,000 of value, how much should this project be worth? If it's a 1 month project, it'll probably cost less than a 6-month project. So once again, you're not only looking at the value, but you're looking at the effort that you're putting in. Another way to do project-based is to scope it out, count up the hours, add some cushion, add some more cushion, assume the number of hours you're going to do, take your hourly rate that you like to use, and boom, you have a project price. Another really nice way, and the ideal way, in my opinion, for most freelancers is to get a retainer. Has anybody here ever, as a freelancer, had a retainer with a client?
No.
I've never swung it, but a software design agency that I advise does have retainers, and the benefit of a retainer is you have guaranteed income, which, as for those of you who've tried the freelancing world before, that alleviates one of the biggest concerns or risks of being a freelancer. The retainer's also nice because you don't have to count your hours, which frankly sucks. You don't have to like overanalyze, like, was that 45 minutes or an hour, and is that, am I being ethical charging this full hour? And it takes a lot of that away. The problem and the challenge with retainer is that I have seen that if the freelancer is not actively managing the client, checking in with the client, asking for work to be done, asking for feedback, and really pushing everything through, if the freelancer gets a little too comfortable, the client stops seeing the value, and the retainer is cut, and it's cut in a way that they're not going to come back to you. So the retainer reduces the risk for the freelancer from a sense of security, but I think it heightens the risk of the relationship between you and the client. Questions, comments on that one?
So, what does a typical retainer looks like? Is it counted by per monthly or
yeah? So
any
usually
other type of structure?
the retainer structures I've seen have it's usually like a 3-month commitment, and for each month it's pricing, and you kind of assume, once again, you kind of assume like 15, 20, 40 hours a month, whatever it is, and you kind of use your hourly rate and then add a little bit to it, and you give them this retainer price, and then you scope out. Sometimes the retainer retainer contract is not to exceed 40 hours a month, something like that. It also could be recurring projects or recurring deliverables, kind of like, for example, like a social media retainer. I'm going to post 20 Instagram posts and 30 articles or whatever it is, and it's kind of like a future promise of an amount of output. Or it can be more strategic, where the closest thing to a retainer I had was for an agile transformation, where I was a Scrum and Agile coach, and I was delivering value. So it was like, we're going to train the company in these processes. By the end of 2 months, they will be running through all the different ceremonies, and we'll see more consistent deliverables. And so it's more strategic. So it's it's similar to project, only the project base usually has an end date, and the retainer feels kind of like a project, but you're doing not to exceed hours is the recommendation, and you're always trying to just keep continuing it. So projects kind of have an end and a start, and retainers feel a little bit more nebulous, and they're ever flowing. So the other two options, which I find to be very similar, are rev share and equity. I'll start with rev share. Rev share makes a ton of sense for digital marketers who are creating ads, who can point exactly to the revenue that is associated with the work they're doing. As a product person, I never figured out a way to do rev share that made any sense for me or my clients, and I don't know of a smart way for a designer to do it, but I did want to put it out there as an option for you. Another one is equity. Equity's weird. As someone who's been in the startup space for almost 10 years now, I have lots of different equity I'm sitting on, and at this point, it's only cost me money. It hasn't brought me any sort of wealth. So I would just caution you to be a little hesitant or skeptical about grabbing equity. I mean, take the equity if they're also paying you, for sure, but if they're only going to offer equity, I just frankly wouldn't recommend it, except for in very special cases. David, what do you got to say?
It just kind of something that was just kind of very timely about this. There was a company I worked for in the past. It was a social media company that it was kind of a retainer, but I saw it as more short-term contracts every 3 months, and I ended up having to let it go because the full-time gig I was working on was too time-consuming. They offered me equity at the end, which I bypassed because I didn't really have confidence in the success of the company. But now, because of all the stuff that's happening with social media and some of the censorship, and you're hearing about how a lot of these people are going to some of these more obscure social media sites. Mm-hmm. Well, one of them was one of the ones where I turned down equity, so you never know what's going to happen with that. That's just what I wanted to chime in.
And was the equity, would it have been that you had to buy into it, or would they just give you a piece?
Yes, it was more just like it was a stock share that I was allowed to do after a certain amount of time. So I don't know if you would call that equity per se, but it was definitely part of like, hey, this is why you should work with us, because you would have this ability to buy into it.
Right. And so I think buying into equity is like, that's up to you, whether or not you want to fork over those thousands of dollars or whatever it might be to buy in. And that makes a lot of sense. I'm glad they were paying you also. Sorry that you have a little bit of FOMO on that equity you missed out on. But I bought equity in a company called ZocDoc, which is doing tremendously well now, but it still hasn't paid out for me. And just my aunt, who is a software engineer who worked at IBM, she worked at Qualcomm, she's been at Apple, she's been at Logitech, she's worked at a whole bunch of big companies, and she's seen a few IPOs and been bought out a few times, like the dream for startup, right? And she told me, she goes, even when it looks really, really good from the outside, I've still never made that much money. People do. People make the money, and I don't mean to say that you shouldn't ever buy equity or anything like that. I just wanted to caution people from foregoing payment for equity, because I think equity is very nebulous and doesn't always pay out, is my main point. David, did you want to say something else?
Oh no, I would 100% agree. Get the cash.
Yeah, get the cash. Okay. So, what's the right price to charge? This is a very kind of technical pricing mentality. I copy and pasted this from an article that I have linked to in the next slide. The Van Westendorp Pricing Sensitivity Meter Questions. So the first step is to ask a whole bunch of people that are similar to the buyers and ask them, what price is it too expensive? When is it too cheap? When is it slightly getting on the high side? And when does it feel like a good value? So you're supposed to ask, 10 plus people this question about your services, about you. Let them look at your portfolio and ask them what they think is like kind of the right price. And the philosophy is the optimal price, the optimum price point, the OPP, other people's property. Okay, is the point at which the number of potential customers who view the product as either too expensive or too cheap is a minimum. Okay, so the people who would possibly considering the purchase is at a maximum. So we're trying to optimize around this too cheap, too expensive. That's a lot to wrap your head around. Here's a graph. Okay, so let's say you asked all these people. We've got, hold on, the too inexpensive. We've got this dark line here, and the too expensive and the too inexpensive. So you have the gray here, and then you've got the too expensive. So we're trying to optimize where you've got too inexpensive and too expensive. I'm going to go back just because this is okay. So you want to optimize the point where the product is either too expensive or too cheap. So these people say it's too inexpensive. Most people think it's too inexpensive at $1, and then some of them said it's too inexpensive at $8, and then other people are looking here, and they're going up, and they're saying it gets too expensive around here. So you try to find the sweet spot where you're minimizing how many people say it's too inexpensive or too expensive. I thought this would go smoothly. As I'm talking, I feel like this isn't explained very well. Does anybody have any questions? Does this make a little bit of sense?
Are you basically saying you should be the middle bid?
I'm not saying that you should be the middle bid. I'm saying that you should talk to people who would be the decision maker and ask them, what's the number that you think is too expensive? What's the number that you think is too cheap? When is it just like kind of on the expensive side, and when is it kind of on the cheap side? And you're trying to optimize between these two. You want to find the fewest people. You're trying to find the number between where people find it expensive and cheap. So some people are going to think that price is a good deal, and other people are going to think it's almost too expensive, and that's where you go, that spot right there.
I think then it becomes quite subjective, and it would vary from client to client as well, right?
Totally. Pricing is absolutely subjective and definitely varies from client to client.
Yeah. So I mean, we cannot make a benchmarking or anything. So when you say talk to the people, you mean talk to the people for that client or that business who are working in that product or something like that?
I'm thinking before you start really trying to close a deal. And I'm thinking, like, let's say you're like, I'm going to become a freelancer. I need to figure out what my pricing is. And so you get on LinkedIn and you find people that are the types of people who would hire you. And try to get them to answer this question. 4 questions. For me, for my skills, for your product, what's too expensive? What's a good deal? Mohit, does that make a little sense?
Yeah, I mean, I still feel like, so I've not done a lot of freelance. I've been mostly full-time all my life. But wherever I've done a little bit of it, it has been more or less, kind of bargaining and talking with the people and, kind of, and it also depends on the client and how you market yourself, because there was places where I've like quoted way too high and nobody asked me any question and they were like, okay. And then there have been places where I've just put a very nominal price and they have like 10 questions like, what is your timeline? What is your strategy when you are delivering? What is your milestone? So I think it's very, very subjective that way. I don't know. I mean,
Mohit, I want to make sure I understand you. Did you say that you gave a low price and they asked you a bunch of questions and didn't trust you, and another time you gave a high price and they were like, yep, no problem?
So I did not give a low price, but one time I gave such a high price so that, they, I was just trying to throw out a number and see if they'll take it in. And I mean, I'd looked into Glassdoor and other places, what the prices were, and the client was fine. It was a, digital marketing agency and they were fine. And it was again another digital agency. And this time I gave a nominal price, not a very high price. And they had so many questions to ask. So
okay, but I want to clarify.
Yeah.
When you gave the high price, did you get the job?
Yeah.
Yeah. So
no questions asked in that. So I feel like it's very subjective to the client itself. Whoever is, sorry, go ahead.
It is definitely subjective to the client. I personally almost always go with the person who gave me the highest hourly rate.
Okay.
Why do you think that is?
Well, I think it's a quality perception. Like, maybe your pricing is higher than the quality is higher, much higher as well.
Quality perception, confidence perception. Yeah. David?
Yeah, I would agree that seems like the case.
So then we should not go for OPP. We should go for the highest money.
Well,
no, I'm just
no. Like, it's within reason. Right?
Yeah, I mean, of course, yes.
So this pricing sensitivity model is not built for freelancers. This is about product pricing. This isn't specific to us at all in this case. I just wanted to expose you to this perspective. One, because Leo was encouraging me to also talk about pricing products. So in theory, if you're trying to figure out how much a product is valued, this is what you do. But I do really think this philosophy applies to pricing yourself. And in fact, the job I just scored, I just started a job last week, and they told me to name my salary, which I found to be incredibly intimidating. And I went and I reached out to a whole bunch of people who work in startups similar to this, who are at a similar stage, but who aren't product people, the VP of engineering, the CEO, the CMO, all these people. And I was like, what do you think my price is worth? And the ranges that people gave me didn't even overlap. But I used this philosophy of finding the optimal price point, and I delivered a range to my future employer, and they were able to meet it. So in my experience, going out, talking to the market, getting input, it's a really nice way to find the sweet spot. Okay.
Carol, can I ask a question on this?
Yeah.
I don't know if you have any insight in how do companies gain a little bit of knowledge of what pricing is valid. I mean, they could just base it just off of the proposals that come in.
Yeah.
But I imagine companies do have a process of kind of understanding the market, understanding what is kind of the expected range. Do you have any insight into that?
So what I've done personally when I'm hiring freelance designers is I go on Upwork and I'll see a range of hourly rates. It's like really easy to go to Upwork and see the rates. And it's also based on the proposals that I get.
Yeah, and also if you get the LinkedIn, advanced premium account, and if you are a hiring person, you can also go over there and see the rate range. I mean, it shows the rate range. So it will also show you region-wise what is the price. So, I mean, I don't do that, but when the HR from our organization puts out a position, that's how they kind of throw back the number to us, and they put in the number of years of experience, and they kind of create a lookup table from there.
So in that case, then you're not necessarily looking at the value these roles would bring to you, but you're just looking at the market price for UX jobs.
From my perspective, I'm trying to get the best bang for my buck, and I'm also trying to de-risk. So I look at the market, and my pricing is informed by the market. That said, when I worked at the Home Depot, my concept of what was an address, like a reasonable market, was broader than when I work at a really scrappy pre-Series A startup with no funding.
Okay.
Okay, so the most recent time I tried to hire a freelance product designer, which I try to do all the time. So if you're at all interested in being a freelance product designer, like find me on LinkedIn, add me. I'll end up working with you at some point probably. I posted on LinkedIn. I was like, I'm a digital health company. We want a product designer to work 5 to 15 hours a week on designing mobile app and a web experience, blah, blah, blah. And I gave him a homework assignment, and I said, quote me the price. What is your hourly rate? And I literally got a range of $15 an hour to $200 an hour. Crazy, right? In this case, I didn't go with the $200 an hour because of a timing issue and a personal issue. It just wasn't going to work out. And and to be fair, the $15 an hour were people offshore. So these are people who live in different economies, who have different standards of living, who are able to have a higher standard of living than we could in the United States on $15 an hour. But I wanted to make sure that I had an American or someone who lived in the United States who was very familiar with American culture, because my users are mostly American. I didn't want to have to deal with translating because my dev team all lives in Greece, so I'm already translating enough. So I wanted the designer to have the context. And I ended up signing someone who was charging $130 an hour. So what I did is anybody who was under $60 an hour, I didn't even talk to them. They were communicating to me with their hourly rate that they are not experienced enough. I chose one person who did the $60 an hour, who had a really nice homework assignment they submitted, and then most of my candidates were sitting in the $120, $130 an hour rate. I think Melanie, yeah.
I was just going to ask if you're reimbursed for the homework assignment based on their hourly price.
You know, it's that is like a really good question, and philosophically, I think that makes a lot of sense. I intentionally made the homework assignment short and time boxed them, encouraged them to spend no more than 1 hour, so my guilt was minimal in not paying them.
Well, that's a very cool way of doing it then. Thank you for all the freelancers out there in the world.
Yeah, because I have a respect for it, but then you also got to take care of the business. I don't know. It's a strange balance to strike, but wild range, right? So I guess my message to you is don't be the cheap option. I don't think it'll serve you. Okay, here's the original Nike logo. Does anybody know the Nike logo story? There's a woman who was in college, and she designed this Nike logo for something. She made a couple $100. And she ended up being a full-time employee at Nike, and the logo that she designed, it changed a little bit, but this is the Nike logo that we still all know and see today. I think it's from the 70s. And originally they'd only, like I said, only paid her a couple $100 as a freelancer, but she ended up coming on full-time. And after Nike had really exploded, they gave her a whole bunch of equity in Nike because of the value that she had added. It's just kind of a fun story. Leo, did you want to elaborate on this story a little bit?
No, I think it's good. I couldn't like tell on top off the top of my head right now. So, but but I think she did. Eventually got like a royalty for her logo, about a few percent of a Nike profit.
So
Yeah.
in this case, getting equity in the beginning would have been great. She didn't, but she was working in a good faith company that eventually gave her equity. The point is that a really brilliant design, you could only make a couple $100, even though you're adding a lot of value. And that if you're in a good situation, they're going to see the value you're adding and end up turning around and giving you that equity. So it's just kind of something to think about. So whenever you think about value-based pricing, it's kind of what we were talking about before about like what matters to the client, like what is the potential input. So I was working with a design agency as what I was a freelancer to a design agency, helping them do pricing strategy. And I made this like calculator that was like, okay, what is the total revenue of the company? What is the potential lift of the project? And what's the percentage impact your work is going to have? And then we just made this calculator and put a multiplier on it. We're like, boom, this is the price of that project. And that way you can have pricing that scales with your company. So, you know, if some startup brand new yoga studio that's like just trying to rent the space in Houston wants you to make a logo, you're going to price that really differently than some venture capital firm who's sitting on a whole bunch of money and they're asking you for a logo. And so at the end of the day, if they've got no more money to spend, the recommendation is that you charge it from them. If you're not sure what percentage impact design can have on revenue, as I'm saying it, that sounds ridiculous because I'm talking to a room full of designers. Sometimes I have to convince people in the business the value of design, but I don't think I have to convince a room full of designers the value of design, do I? Okay, so we can kind of skip that, but the trick, the problem, the dilemma with value-based pricing is that usually people want to see your pricing early on in the situation, and I am going to ask for pricing before I give you enough information to size up my organization. So the dilemma is, how do you have scalable pricing that's ready to present an offer to the client who's trying to compare you to other options? And the recommendation I have is that you create buckets, personas of your potential clients. So you've got the scrappy startup, you've got the pre-series B startup, you've got the enterprise organization, the mom and pop shop. I don't know, is there another type of persona of a client you might have? Maybe like an enormous corporate company. And I would just make some assumptions and pre-price stuff out, and maybe each one of them gets a different hourly rate from you. And just sit down one day and just write it down and make a commitment to yourself. And you don't have to publish it on your website or anything, but just know that mom and pop is going to be charged differently than a huge corporate organization, and just pre-decide what you're going to be charging people based on which vertical or group they lump into, and that way it's going to be a lot easier for you to fire off your pricing at a way that's really appropriate, because you shouldn't be charging the same thing for all these different people. Okay, so when you're doing value-based pricing, and just whenever you're working in an organization with OKRs, or if you just want to be doing really smart design and product development, you're supposed to identify metrics and determine what success looks like ahead of time. So, wait, I thought this was more. So, has anybody ever worked with OKRs?
No, but I know what they are.
Axel, you want to talk about them?
No, I haven't worked with them, but I'm familiar with the methodology.
So, I haven't studied them, but I've worked in places that do it. So, like, what happens with OKRs is you get, like, the executive team decides, like, 3 company-wide goals, and then they roll them out to the company, and each section of the company is like, I fit into this goal this way, and you make all these sub-goals that match, but every goal is supposed to be associated with a measurable impact, a number. I'm going to get the monthly active users number to be X. I'm going to have our, email click-through rate to be Y. Like, whatever these numbers are, and you're trying to shoot for them. And my suggestion to you, who I personally struggle with communicating to like the finance part of my business, the value of designers that I bring in, the value of discovery-based development, and the value of slowing down and not just churning out a bunch of product, but instead doing it artfully. And the way I'm easily able to communicate it is through OKRs and metrics. So I encourage you that whenever you're thinking about maybe you're doing your make sure that you're focusing on the right thing and to help prove that you're definitely going to be adding value for the client. So these are just kind of a summary. Don't undervalue yourself. Look at the market and be realistic about where you are in your career. Go for retainers or rev share, and rev share only if it looks good and if it's reasonable. And lean on value-based pricing so that as you scale and you get bigger and better clients, you're not limited by the number of hours you have, but instead by the value that you're adding. That's me. My name's Carol Tyger. If you want a product design job, not now, I just hired someone, but I'm always looking. So find me on LinkedIn if you want. But otherwise, what other questions or how do you want to end this, David?
Hey, I have a question. One thing we haven't talked about was actually collecting the cash and some of the pitfalls that come. We've all heard about people that have been burned by small startups. Is there any, well, they can also have been burned by big companies as well. Any recommendations on how people should handle that?
So I'm lucky enough that almost all of my freelancing was done through my personal network with a group of people that I trusted, and I've never had anything remotely close to a problem. Other people do. And one thing you can do is collect 50% ahead of time. That doesn't work if you're hourly. But if it's project-based, you can collect 50% ahead of time, or you have these different milestones. So you collect 20% at kickoff, 20% when this milestone is hit, and you're regularly collecting is one tactic. Does anyone else have something to share about how to protect yourself?
I use a really cool tool called Bonsai. I don't know if you guys have heard of it, but it's set up for freelancers, and it has everything like contracts, like basic contracts. It has a way for you to collect money through their site, and what else? There's like it basically has all of the like initial steps that you need to take in order to start a project. So like a proposal space, contract space, invoicing space. It's a little pricey for everything that I want. I'm kind of thinking about maybe switching, not sure yet, but I think it's a good start for people starting out freelancing.
I can recommend just joining your local kind of freelance community groups. I know today I even saw like don't work with this client. They've got a job opening right now and they didn't pay me. So the local community can be a benefit when you're looking.
Where did you find that? I'm sorry, Mohit. Melanie, where did you find that community? Was it like on Facebook or?
Yeah, so the one specifically I'm referencing is on Facebook. It's the Houston Digital Jobs.
Mm-hmm.
And, take it with a grain of salt. People who have bad experiences are more likely to say negative things. People with good experiences more likely to say good things. But, so I saw one today where a guy was just like, there's a new job opening. These people didn't pay me. Don't ever work with them. They're shysters.
Who was it? Who never paid him?
I don't remember the specific one, but I'm sure if you logged into Houston Digital Jobs, you'd see it at the top of the list. So, not a horrible thing to just keep apprised of.
Yeah. Mohit, what were you going to say? I interrupted you like 4 times today, but again, then.
No. That's completely fine. I mean, it's all cool. You just talked about, collecting money at regular intervals, and I have not faced any problem, but I feel like if you are getting money and if you break it down into, small chunk of deliverables, so that they are measurable. So at least you are getting paid every 15 days or something, every 7 days. So, put on deliverables like that. And I think so most of the clients now work in agile environment. So you can kind of baseline with that. So at least, you get to know if the client is going to pay or not, because let's say you finish 7 days work and next week you can build the cycle and, again build the cycle. So that way you will at least come to know, not wait till the end of the tunnel to see, okay, now the client is not going to pay anything. So, because they also want the work delivered out of you. So, it works in their interest as well to pay the money on time.
Yeah, so I would say if you are working on a project base, so I mean 50% of the cost of the project, the overall cost of the project, overall price of the project would be your cost. So you would likely, you wanna, mark it up, maybe around 150 or 200%, and so you have enough buffer to work with if the client give you trouble or doesn't pay you. So yeah, just my advice.
And another thing I want to say, so Mohit, if you and a different freelancer were exactly the same and you were insisting on being paid once a week and the other one was insisting on being paid once a month, I wouldn't even hesitate. I would go with the once a month. Because as a client, as the person paying you, it is a huge pain for me to go and hunt down the finance chick, get her to approve the bill, make sure she sends it along. So as a client, I'm trying to pay you as infrequently as possible. And it's not because I want you to starve. It's because it's operationally a headache, and it's not something I normally manage. I don't have a good flow for it. So just when you're thinking about like the client experience, I understand why you'd ask for it in regular intervals, but I just wanted to kind of just to add another perspective.
Oh yeah. The people, the clients I've worked with have been mostly Fortune 500. So what do they have? Like they have beeline system or an automated tool system. So you don't have to do anything. The moment you put in your timesheet, it automatically has the contract when you have made a contract with them. That whenever I finish, 15 days, it automatically generates a payment cycle and it comes to your bank account. So, that has been my experience, and, I've never faced any challenge. So, again, I mean, if it works out monthly, that is also, good to go ahead. But, what I had done was when I was doing for two projects, we decided that every sprint, we'll fill in the timesheet, and in the B line, there was a system which automatically takes it and it schedules the payment after the approval from the manager. So that's how it was working over there. So, I mean, again, this also depends on client and how their operating model and, system is set up. So, yeah, I'm not sure about that as well.
Okay, does anyone have any other questions or comments?
I have one question, and it kind of goes back a little bit to my initial question in the beginning. And do you figure into your pricing the fact whether you're going to be a single contributor? You mentioned that sometimes you might not have your full project scope when you're asked to give your initial pricing, and you might find out after you've kind of given that initial pricing that what they're looking for is much more exhaustive than maybe you had initially thought for like a mid-career product. What they really need is like they need a head of product. Do you have any recommendations for pricing yourself in that sort of a situation, whether you're going to be a single contributor or as part of a team? And as well as any recommendations for negotiating after that initial price is set out once you've got more information about the project?
It's hard to change your price once you know more without having like a really concrete answer. I didn't understand your first question though, so I think you were saying that you're assuming that, like, let's say it's a product role, you're assuming it's kind of like a normal, senior product manager kind of scope, and then once you hear more, you realize it's a head of product scope and therefore should be more expensive. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, basically.
I'm just trying to, from my perspective, I'm already operating at a head of product level. So even if they're looking for an associate or junior product manager, if they want me, they're going to pay for my head level.
Okay.
So I'm struggling to answer that question, but I think it's a really important question to have, because it's basically, there's, from a design perspective, I can think of two different types of contractors I'm looking for. One time it's just like, I already know exactly what I want, just like visualize, turn it into something visual and real and that has good design in it. Or there's other types of designers when I need someone who's strategic. I want them to empathize with the user. I want them to do a huge storyboard. I want them to iterate and do user testing. Is that kind of what you're touching on, Melanie? Like the two different types?
Yeah.
Yeah, I would just always assume it's the expensive one. But you're saying you've already priced yourself low, you learn more, and you realize it's bigger, then I would just be really explicit and be like, because frankly, if it's going to be that much bigger than what you thought, you're probably not going to enjoy the work. You're not going to want to get paid that little. So I would say, when I first gave you this price of, $80 an hour, I had expected it would be this type of work. Hearing more, and the type of strategy it's going to take and the type of value I'm going to be adding, it's actually a lot more reasonable for me to be charging $120 an hour. I understand that that's me changing my price, and I'm sorry if that's, breaking your trust, or if that's not a good experience for you, but I just can't take on this job at $80 an hour, so I'm going to have to change my quote to $120, and I hope that still works for you. But you're going to have to do that before a contract is signed.
Sure. Yeah. So do you have any recommendations for freelancers of what they should be asking for in some of these contracts?
Ooh. I'd have to research a little bit, because I have a lot of contracts. Give me 1 second. I think if I research over here, you won't. Basically, you wanna have, if it depends on what the contract is. So if it's a retainer, you want to have a certain forewarning before they can pull the retainer. You also, sometimes in retainer, the thing to consider is what about the rollover hours? Do you have rollover hours, and for how long can they roll over? And another thing that's important to put in a contract is caveats and around SLAs. So one thing you want to do is hold your client accountable to responding to you, because if you're really a contractor and then the client just ghosts you, you can't do your work, and that's their fault, not yours. So some sort of acknowledgement that if they're not responsive, it kind of absolves you of responsibility, and then maybe some sort of caveat where they have to pay you anyways if you want. I've never seen that, but I don't know. What else could come to mind? What else do you want to put in contracts to protect yourself as a freelancer? I've done not to exceed. So, I've told people I'm not going to work more than 5 hours a week, and sometimes I have a lot of clients. I've even told people, I'll take you on. They were approaching me, so it was a different dynamic. I was like, I'll take you on, but I can do no more than 5 hours a week. And by the way, I have this one client that's my primary client, and their needs are going to trump yours, and they were okay with that. But that really depends on the dynamic and how you met each other. Leo, what were you going to say?
So we have like a 10,000 deposit or initialization fee, and then you just work towards the pricing. So if we put more hours in, you just kind of work off that. But there's also another buffer, in case if you need to go to small claim court. So the limit is also $10,000. So if they don't pay, and then you can sue them for that month. Sue your client for that month.
what were you hoping we covered in this pricing talk that was not covered yet? Is anybody just like, why didn't you talk about this? Or anyone else have anything that you want to make sure we talk about?
I have more questions, but I'm going to try and let anybody else ask if they do.
We have time, no problem.
Sure. So maybe one of the other questions I had was, and I'm not sure if you have experience in this, but when a consulting company comes and they're saying we're going to bring a bunch of designers and we're going to come up with a contract for that work, is there anything else that goes into that consideration of kind of rather than an independent freelancer going more of a consulting sort of a situation? How is that pricing different? And
say that again. The pricing between who and who? The difference between who and who?
So let's say rather than a single operator coming in and working for you, a consulting company coming and saying, I'm going to take on this bid for your project. I'm going to bring 2 UX designers, some developers, a project manager on, and that kind of stuff. Or is it pretty similar to the single operator?
So I recently, when I was getting bids, I had one single operator quote me at 200. I had 2 consultancies quote me at 130 and 120, and then I had a different single operator quote me at 100. And these were like my most viable options. All that to say is I'm not willing personally to pay for the overhead of a project manager and a whole team because I am a good project manager, and so I don't see the value in it, so I don't want to pay for it. The upside of a consultancy is that you don't, as a client, the risk is lower with a consultancy because it's less likely that like there's not one single point of failure or that someone decides to go in-house or something because they already kind of have a full-time job. And so I will pay a premium, a little bit, a 10 or 20% premium to get a team so that I feel like I'm less likely to lose them. But I don't personally see the value in paying for a project manager and all this stuff. But I have all sorts of extreme opinions about project management that I'll spare you.
Cool.
So speaking more as the individual, Carol, what kind of advice, I guess, or like, I wish I had known this when I started out freelancing, not necessarily about like the theme, I guess, of what we're talking about, but just overall, that you would encourage people to follow?
Say it again, Ileana. What's the question?
So how would you have been a freelancer for over 10 years, I believe that's what you said. So is there anything that you would say, this is what I wish I had learned early on, saying to some potential freelancers who are out here like myself, who have just started in this business?
So I have not been a freelancer for over 10 years. I've been working in tech for over 10 years. I was a freelancer basically for 5 or 6 months this year because I was in weird transition. But I've done freelance stuff while, like, I've moonlit for a lot of my career. I think so one thing that happened to me this summer is I quoted myself to someone. I said, I'll charge you $100 an hour. And she knew me really well. And she was like, Carol, you've got to charge me more. So I'm just going to reiterate, don't undervalue yourself, and don't. I think even Mohit had this experience where you can price yourself out of a job because you make the price too low.
Can I also add a little bit to that? One thing I would just say, just from a little bit of experience I have, my experience isn't that much in freelance, but I've also worked with a lot of folks who have. The companies that tend to want people that work cheap, and that's what they're looking for, tend to, and again, I'd love to hear some feedback whether you guys agree or not, tend to be actually sometimes the clients that are the absolute murder to work with. You end up
totally,
and they become the ones that are either difficult to pay, micromanage, The large companies, the ones that they're not counting the dollars and stuff, they tend to be the easiest to experience. So that's something that you should really consider as well.
I think that's a great point. That the type of person who's going for the cheapest option is probably not going to be they're not going to treat you that well.
I can third that.
You want someone who not only values design and the type of work you do, but just like values you. It's important.
I think I'm ready to change my prices now.
Nice. Does anyone want to share? I'll share my prices with you. This summer, the highest I charged was $130 an hour, and the lowest I charged was $100 an hour. And I was on TopTal, which is a really interesting like marketplace to find work. And someone DM'd me and they were like, "We really want you for this gig, but we need you to lower your rate." And I said, "No, I'm not lowering my rate. That's what I'm worth." And I still got the job. But yeah, those are the rates I was charging this summer. Ileana, are you going to raise it by 20%, 50%? How much are you going to raise it by?
No, I like 50%.
Nice. Good for you. Do it. The hard thing is raising your rate on people you've already started billing. That is something that eventually you might have to do.
Yeah. I mean, I only have one quote-unquote real client that I'm working with right now. They might hire me on as a full-time employee, so there's another hurdle to battle, I guess. But yeah, a lot to think about.
Hey Carol, so what was the website, the marketplace you were on?
TopTal.
TopTal?
Yeah, I think they have designers. They definitely, it's like I'm pretty sure they have design. It's really cool. So TopTal is a marketplace where it's a really rigorous application process. And they're all over the world. And it's literally the hardest interview process I've ever gone through to get accepted as a product manager and a project manager. I did both, and then you enter into these verticals, and so I have the vertical product, and so I can see all these jobs that are posted. There were like 10 jobs posted a day, and they're very, very specific. This industry, this time zone, this client, they prefer someone from this country. Let me know if you're interested. And they have these internal recruiters that are full-time employees of TopTal who are sorting through the talent pool, and they serve 3 options to the clients who they sourced, and then the client interviews you and chooses one, is how it works. And you get to name your own rate.
So when you are working, and I guess you said you've only been doing it for 5 or 6 months full time.
And I stopped and I went full time. I went in-house, but yes.
Yeah. Would you recommend that people try to keep it at 40 hours a week, or is it really up to the person on how much they personally can take on?
Oh man, during the pandemic, I worked 1 week on and 1 week off for 3 months straight, which means that I crammed 2 work weeks into 1 week, and I was pulling 80 to 90 hours a week. And then the next week I wouldn't do anything, just because there's nothing better for me to do. Like, what else am I going to do? Read a book? I guess I could do that. But I definitely think it's personal. I would not commit to any one client more than 40 hours. But I personally can take on about 60 hours a week and still have a decent, and still feel healthy. And I think it's very personal.
Anybody have questions?
Or questions for each other. I mean, you're all designers. Like, I don't know. Is anyone going to share their hourly rate? Is anyone comfortable doing that? It's okay if you're not.
I can say that I generally start around 150, and I go around there. Generally, I've never been paid that, but that's a good starting place.
Do they negotiate you down?
I've more not negotiated down the total, but paid it in equity. So I've mostly done startup work where, and again, I'm the same way. None of it has shown rewards. So really, you're just losing money. Especially if it says they have to go public. Read the fine print.
It's just so unlikely. And then even my friends who worked at Uber, who had the options, who it got to go public, the amounts of taxes they had to pay, it's crazy. It's like a lose-lose.
Come on, no one else?
Yeah, so how does the equity gets calculated, So I want to know kind of how it converts, from maybe salary and you're paying part of it, and how does it get to convert into equity,
Say that again, or Melanie, you're going to answer that, please go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say that I was pretty desperate for work at that point. I asked a friend who knew more about it than I did. He reviewed it and said, yeah, this is about standard for startups. And went with that. I'll be honest, I still don't totally understand it. So, yeah. I got the same rate as the people who were investing in the company did.
Well, that's pretty good. I guess the other thing I'd say is that you are interviewing them just as much as they are interviewing you, whether it be a client or a full-time job, and just always try to take the power back in that dynamic and just make sure that your needs are being met.
Yeah, so I think it would be time to think about start raising your prices. All right, so does anybody have any more questions? I think Carol has some event afterward she needs to attend. So I think if we don't have any more questions, I think we can probably end this talk.
Okay, yeah, I'm going to Zoom from Houston, and then I'm going to Zoom to New York right after. The beauty of the COVID era.
All right. Anybody?
I just want to say thank you for giving this talk. It was fantastic.
Oh, well, I'm glad you thought it was fantastic. I think the pricing, especially the really technical pricing part, has a lot of improvement that I could give it. But that was very nice feedback. Thank you, David.
Yeah, it was very helpful. Thank you so much.
Yeah, know your worth. And as much as you want to talk about pricing and any stuff like that, I think it's really important for people to talk about price and wage and salary so that it's empowering to know what's out there in the market. So thanks for sharing your rate, Melanie.
And all right. And Carol, again, how does people reach you and how?
Oh yeah, my name is Carol Tyger. Maybe you can see it. I am so easy to find on the interwebs. I recommend LinkedIn. Yeah.
All right. All right, and don't forget to check out our Interaction Design Conference 2021 on interaction21 at IxDA.org. And all right, and thank you, Carol, again. And all right, I'm gonna end the talk. All right, for this evening.
Absolutely. Thanks for inviting me. It was a pleasure. Bye.
And hopefully we can do another event later on if you have time, Carol. Okay.
Okay, well, yeah, we have to
I
come up
would
with a
be
good
interested
topic.
to kind of find out how does the kind of the equity chart works, but maybe that's another talk later on.
I don't even know if I'm the right person to do all that, but I
But
know a lot about
maybe we'll find
product
somebody else to
management
do
and
it,
Agile.
but
We'll figure something out.
Or if you're interested in other topics, we can have a conversation too. So, all right.
Cool.
See you guys later, and
All right. Everyone.
bye all.